For the last 6 months and 7,000 kilometers, we've been running this Citroen C5 X as a long-term test car here on the Chasing Cars channel. We've got a really well-established long-term test program where we're always running a fleet of interesting cars to see how they fare over more than just the usual week's review. Now, normally we choose cars that are pretty popular and have a huge buying segment here in Australia, but sometimes we like to do something a bit more left field and alternative, like this Citroen C5 X. And that's because while the station wagon market in Australia is now a very small one, it tends to be an interesting one. We love wagons here on Chasing Cars for their car-like driving dynamics, extra practicality over a sedan, but a lower driving position than an SUV. And that's exactly what the C5 X promises. Of course, it's French, so you're also expecting a good serve of quirkiness. I know that's a cliche, but when it comes to this car, it certainly checks out. So if you're looking for a family vehicle and you definitely don't want to have the same car as other people on your block, should you consider the Citroen C5 X? Well, in today's video, I'm going to tell you the 5 things that we loved about the C5 X over the last half year, and the 5 things that we didn't like and we think Citroen needs to work on in future. We're going to talk about the driving dynamics, the pricing, the practicality, and the little odds and ends that you only figure out if you really spend time getting to know a car and put the work in. And that's exactly what we've done. Before we get started, hit subscribe down below. Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car. Brought to you by Budget Direct. The first thing we loved is something that Citroen really gets right, and that's the general design and panache that you get with a C5 X. This car looks premium, and you'd be surprised to learn that it's actually under $60,000 before on-road cost. It looks like a luxury car, and more importantly, it looks like nothing else on the road. Now, Citroen says that this is a real segment-bending vehicle. It's got elements of a sedan, a wagon, and an SUV. Here on Chasing Cars, we've been pretty content just to call it a station wagon, but for sure, you're gonna notice that cutaway roofline there at the back that does evoke a bit of a sportback kind of design. It's very sleek and aerodynamic. I think if this car had a best angle, it would be this front 3/4 here, where you can really take in this gorgeous front end design. And we also specified our C5 X in Amazonite grey, which is this absolutely gorgeous green grey color that suits the fact that this car is a cladded and lifted wagon, and it fits in really well here in Australia. Do you like the way the C5 X looks? Let us know down below in the comments. Another thing that we loved about the C5 X is the overall value for money with this package. There's a general rule of thumb, at least here in Australia, that passenger cars, non-SUVs, give you much better value for money because the demand is just lower for these cars. Everybody wants high-riding SUVs, and manufacturers know that, so they charge more for them. Here in the C5 X, this car is just under 58 grand before on-road costs, so just over 60 grand drive away, and you're getting a lot of car for your money. It's got a lot of size, it's a big car for a big country if you like. You're getting all that boot space and back seat space and a very premium interior and exterior, plus sufficient performance. Combine that with the fact that the car has a genuinely premium vibe and look about it, and I think you are getting relatively good value for money out of 60 grand worth of coin. Of course, value is entirely relative, and you're welcome to spar with me down below in the comments, but in an era where cars are getting much more expensive very quickly, I actually don't think the Citroen's a bad buy. Just don't think about the depreciation too much. One of the real benefits of the substantial size of the C5 X is its practicality. That starts around here at the boot, which is a powered tailgate, and it gets up and out of your way quickly. It's big, and even though it looks pretty big, it's actually shocked us with just how much we've been able to get into the back of this car over its 6 months with us. The presence of quite a few pine cones back here will let you know that this is the car that collected my 2022 Christmas tree, for instance, but it's also done a bunch of interstate travel with various staffers here at Chasing Cars. We love the fact that the cargo blind is actually attached to the boot structure, so it gets up and out of your way without you having to retract it like you have to do in something like a Subaru Outback or a Volkswagen Passat All-Track. That's a lovely, smart touch. Underneath this boot floor, which actually does have these running board things to prevent scratching up the carpeting, you've got a space saver spare. That's a bit of a downside for extensive country touring in Australia, but better than nothing. You've got a pocket off to the left, and you've got the ability to remotely drop these seats down from right here in the boot. They lay almost flat, so you're able to get really long items into the back of this vehicle with no issue at all. And because it's a wagon, your loading height is about right. It's not as cumbersome as in some SUVs, nor is it too low. So when it comes to practicality, the Citroen really nails the brief. We love the execution of the Citroen C5 X's interior, particularly for a car that isn't especially expensive and isn't priced up against luxury cars like Audis, BMWs and Mercs. The positioning is more like that of a Volkswagen, but the interior materials are very generous. We're sitting on Napa leather seats, which are finished in this charcoal color in Australia. You can get a light beige in Europe, which would have been a really good fit here as well, particularly because the seats themselves aren't cooled, so they can get a little bit hot in the Australian summer. Thankfully, we do have a cream headliner, so it doesn't get too bad in here, and the air conditioning is remarkably powerful. The steering wheel also feels great in the hand. You've got soft materials covering virtually everything, including down here where your leg comes to rest, plus some interesting secondary trims throughout the interior that kind of keep you interested on a long drive. You're looking around, you're feeling like you're sitting in a car which is both well built and also sumptuously trimmed. The technology even works well. Finally, Peugeot and Citroen have gotten their act together on the tech. We've got a huge 12-inch screen here in the center, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You just have a really simple and minimal screen in front of you as a driver though, with more information on the heads-up display. I've found that that has worked really well. And while the car doesn't get premium audio like it does in Europe, the standard stereo is actually still very good on the C5 X. You've got convenient device charging, real physical controls for the fan and temperature, which is fantastic and rare these days, and a good driving position that's elevated above a normal car but isn't as high and kind of isolating as an SUV. So on the whole, we've enjoyed the interior of this car. One thing that we haven't gotten on with so well in the Citroen is the seat comfort, and that took us by surprise because Citroen is very proud to advertise that these seats are meant to be very ergonomic, and they've even got a memory foam layer, a bit like a premium bed mattress, to make sure they mold to your shape over a long drive. However, this hasn't really worked. These seats are very soft and plush, and that's exactly what you're going to think if you go and test drive the car. And up into the 2-hour mark on a drive, they're really great. So for short trips, we love these seats. The problem is the supportiveness actually tends to run out after about 2 hours. So for long interstate drives here in a big country like Australia, the seat support is not good enough to let you get out of the car feeling refreshed and comfortable over a longer stint. This might be explained by the fact that while Europe and France do have road trip cultures, much like Australia, the stints that drivers there tend to put in are a lot shorter than the kind of all-day 1,000-kilometre drives that become quite normal here in Australia. So one thing we'd love to see Citroen work on is the ultra-long distance comfort of these seats. Going under the bonnet of our Citroen C5 X, you definitely notice the lack of a gas strut, but while we found the performance of our car's 1.6 litre turbo adequate enough, with its 133 kilowatts dispatching 0 to 100 in 8.18 seconds here at our test track, overseas you can get a significantly gutsier version of this car, and that's the C5 X plug-in hybrid, which makes a combined 167 kilowatts of power, while also promising a really usable all-electric range. We'd love to see the PHEV just flat out replace this engine here in Australia, because we don't really think there's a need for a niche car like this to have a non-hybrid powertrain going forward. While the European C5 X plug-in hybrid is front-wheel drive, we know that Peugeot and Citroen are completely capable of making their plug-in hybrids all-wheel drive by situating the electric motor on the rear axle. If that was done for the C5 X, it would suddenly be all-wheel drive, just like its major rivals, the Subaru Outback, Volkswagen Passat Alltrack, and the Volvo V60 Cross Country, and that would help. The main fault that we've identified over the last 6 months with our C5 X is the low-speed transmission calibration. And this is weird because Peugeot and Citroen normally calibrate their 8-speed torque converter automatic transmission very well. And it's an ACEN box. It's not a dual clutch. It's nothing particularly exotic. It's an ACEN transmission. And yet something has gone badly wrong with the calibration of the C5 X version of this transmission. It only seems to be a problem under 20 kilometers per hour, which is why I'm crawling as we speak. Setting off from a stop, needing to change the amount of throttle input at low speed, slowing down, results in just too much clunkiness in first and second gear, and it's kind of difficult to explain without you having the experience of test driving the car. But what it has the effect of doing is just really reducing the feeling of polish and finesse when you drive the C5 X in town, as a lot of people will do. Of course, if most of your driving is on the open road, this will be less of a problem, but the jerkiness and clunkiness when setting off from a stop in the C5 X is hard to explain, and it makes the car feel like it's got an old school dual clutch box, and that's a shame. Plus, there's a further calibration issue with the start-stop system on the car. If I bring the C5 X to a stop now, and the start-stop will kick in, it locks out the power steering. And that's only a small complaint, and it's certainly not unique to the Citroen C5 X, but what it means is that you're unable to turn the wheels while you're at a junction, for instance, without restarting the motor, which of course then triggers sound and vibration through the cabin before you even want to lift off the accelerator and take off. Many other vehicles will allow you to change the steering angle while start-stop is engaged, so that when you are ready to take off, you can travel in the direction that you choose and only experience the engine coming on when you're ready to actually move off. It'd be nice to see the software updated in that regard. There's actually further software work to be done in the adaptive cruise control and lane keeping assist as well. And if you're starting to get a bit of a theme here that some of the technological systems under the skin need extra work, then you'd be correct. So when it comes to the adaptive cruise, it works well enough, but occasionally it will detect a car in the next lane over and start braking even though there's no obstruction in front of you, which is annoying. And when it comes to the lane keep assist, it's really overzealous on country roads and it starts grabbing at the wheel and annoying you as a driver when you don't actually need any assistance. That means that you go into the touchscreen over here and you turn it off, and then when you might really need it, well, it's not going to be there because you've turned it off. And that's why good tuning is just as important as having the feature in the first place. One thing that we have loved about the C5 X is the ride. This car does have Citroen's hydropneumatic cushioning system at the top of the dampers. It's not a full-on hydropneumatic suspension like Citroen's of old, which is a shame, but it does a really good job of insulating you from the biggest hits on country roads, and we have plenty of those here in Australia. At higher speeds, the ride is really serene and composed and relaxing, though in town you still notice potholes and square edge bumps where seemingly that cushion can't really do too much to help. Connected to this factor though is we've been absolutely thrilled at the build quality of the C5 X. It may be a Chinese built Citroen, but it's completely free of rattles and creaks. This is one of our best built long-termers that we've ever had. So, would we recommend the Citroen C5 X? Well, yes, but only if Citroen addresses the two things that we think are not currently livable with the car. And they're the transmission calibration at low speed, where it's just too jerky to feel like a premium product. And the second thing is that the memory foam seats need version 2 to address their longer distance comfort for stints in the driver's seat of more than about 2 hours, particularly because this car is so good for country touring. But if you can live with those things, if you test drive the car, if you borrow one from a dealer for the weekend and you can live with those things, then we think this car has a lot of charm to it. However, you'd have to really dislike options like the Subaru Outback, Volkswagen Passat Alltrack and Volvo Cross Country for the C5 X to really make financial sense. But if you're one of those people, then we think you'll find a lot to like with this big French station wagon. Very keen to know your views, so let me know down below in the comments. While you're there, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell if you want to see more of our long-term content. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.